Hello peeps. So again, welcome along to part 6 of my 5TB Masters build. Today we're going to be looking at the PSP. We'll be having a quick look at it running the standalone PPSSPP emulator. And also I'm going to take a look at the PPSSPP core via Retroarch. So I'm going to show a bit of configuration, hopefully a few tips and tricks for people, setting up controllers, scraping the system, showing about the save states, stuff like that basically. So we'll get straight into the video after, of course, I'm going to beg you for a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I appreciate everybody who's subscribed to me recently. So firstly, I'm going to get some ROMs copied over to my Retrobat folder. I'm going to take my PSP collection from my 8TB build. So as we come into my 8TB drive here, I'm going to go into the Retrobat folder, go into where my ROMs are, down to the PSP. I'm not going to copy over the videos and images. These are CSO files for the PSP. That's the file I use. It can load other files, I believe. But as I say, I'm going to leave the images and videos because I'm going to show you how to scrape the system. So right click, copy. Come into drive where my new build is, into Retrobat, ROMs, down to PSP. And paste them into here. So now the games are copied over, boot up Retrobat. And as you can see, we're going to the PSP and there's no artwork at all for them. So before we scrape the system, I'm going to come down to the Retrobat system. Scroll up to the PPSSPP emulator. Which is this little cross here. I'll load this up. And as you can see, if you look in the top right hand corner, I'm running version 1.12.3. And as you see in the bottom left hand corner, it says there's a new version available, which is 1.15.2. As you can see, also it's automatically populated all my games. So I'm going to go to the download, which is going to shoot the website up. And you've got obviously all the different systems here. We obviously want it for Windows, so I'm going to download the PPSSPP, install it. And then once it's downloaded, we're going to run it. Of course, click yes here. Allow this app to make changes to your device. I want it in English, and I'm going to leave it on the C program files PPSSPP folder. And let that install. We click finish. It's gonna shoot the README up and load, but obviously as you can see now we've got the newer version. It isn't going to populate my games because obviously it's not configured to say where the games are. So we'll close out of this, close down Windows and come exit the PPSSPP. That's the older version. And I'm going to come out of Retrobat. There is different ways of doing this, but it's easy enough to do this. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come into my Retrobat folder. I'm going to go to Emulators. I'm going to down to PPSSPP and I'm going to rename this just in case anything happens with the new version and there's some things that don't work or it knackers something up. I'm basically going to rename it to PPSSPP old. And I'm just checking here to make sure there's similar sort of files what's there now. I don't want to copy them all over and it sort of be a different system. And as you can see, it's the same. So this is the new version here, what I've just downloaded. I'm going to right click, copy it. I'm going to paste it into my 5TB drive. As you can see there, I've got the PPSSPP old and now the PPSSPP. If there's any issues with this, I can obviously delete it and carry on using the old one because I know it works fine. I'm just going to quickly try and load a game to make sure it's working right. As you can see, it's not running full screen, but the game's loaded up, so that's all working fine. As you can see at the top here, you've got all your game settings, all your emulation settings, what you can change from here, but I'll show you going into the actual emulator itself how to do it. So again, we'll boot up the PPSSPP from within the Retrobat folder. first things first, it's showing the one game that I've just played, so it's populating that one game. We'll go down to the settings. And as you can see here, the full screen box is unticked, so we'll just tick this and then it's going to run all the games in full screen. And also down here, if you come right down to the bottom, you can show the frames per second and show the speed, which is basically out if the game's running at 100%. So we'll exit back out of PPSSPP. So if we come back into PlayStation Portable, press start. Go down to advanced system options. As you can see, we're set to the PPSSPP emulator. It hasn't got a great deal of configuring that you can do here, to be fair. You can obviously change the internal resolution. So we believe in the game aspect ratio 16:9. I've got it set at 1080p here. The video mode again doesn't do anything to emulate it, won't affect that. It's just basically for the resolution of your system, stuff like that. So basically in emulation there's frame skip, and that basically is if you're struggling. I'm hoping we're not going to struggle for games today. If a game's struggling to run and it's a bit laggy and the sound's crackling and stuff like that, you can put the frame skip on. That sometimes help, but it can make your game look a little bit choppy, but it can help with performance. So also there's the Liberto PPSSPP core, which has got a lot more settings that you can change in Retrobat. Basically the standalone PPSSPP emulator, you would do all your changes within the emulator, not in Retrobat. But anyway, we'll put it back on PPSSPP, the standalone, and that's what we'll start with. So we'll boot a game up. And as the hotkeys not configured for my joystick yet, I'll press escape to go into the PPSSPP menu. Such a mouthful. So while in the menu here, you can see on the left side your save states, and on the right hand side you've got your settings. You can create a game config file. So if we go into settings, to controls, control mapping, you can change anything here. Basically you can come in and change it however you want it to play on your controller. You can come in and change it. Obviously the PSP only had the D-pad and the one thumbstick. So firstly, if you come down to pause, the pause section, this is what takes you into the PPSSPP menu. Now basically, as you can see, it's set for the Xbox 360 trigger left. So when you're playing a game, you're going to catch that all the time, so you don't want it set as that. Also, it's set for the break and the home button. So I'm going to delete these. I'm going to press plus to add a new hotkey for the pause. Also, when you're in here, you can press two buttons at once. So basically I'm going to use select and the blue X button on the controller. If you press them simultaneously, it will then go into the PPSSPP menu. So as you can see here, when I'm pulling the right trigger, it's fast forwarding the emulator. I don't want that because you'll be pressing it when you're not meaning to. I'm going to delete this fast forward, which is the right trigger, which again you can catch and it's going to fast forward the game. Again, I'm going to do a 2-button press, which is going to be the select button and the right trigger. I don't ever use that fast forward, to be fair. It works. If you're getting impatient, you can fast forward it. So now what you can do in the emulator as well, you can create a game config. So basically any changes you make in the game config, once you create one, will only change for that one game. So if there's a game that's not quite running right, you can go in and drop the resolution down a little bit. You can have a tinker about, or also on the other side, if there's a game that's not really demanding, you can come in and up the resolution to the fullest, and you can add some filter in and stuff, whatever you want. You basically have a play about with it. Also, you've got your 3 different backends on this. We'll be using Direct 3D11. Obviously, on the Retroarch core, you can put the 12 on it. But obviously, change the resolution, like I said. If it's running really fast, you can knock it up to like 6 times like we have here. Frame skip, you're hopefully not going to need that. It's only if you're going to be struggling, if your games are not running quite right. Again, you've got all this other stuff down here. I'll leave it as it is. I've not really had a look at the upscale type, to be fair. I'm assuming with the PPSSPP emulator, because it's such a good emulator and it's been out for a while, it's really, really well optimized. I'm assuming that all these settings, like the upscale types and stuff like that, is already set on probably the most popular one. So I'm leaving as it is. They run fine, they look good, they play really well. And also here, if you go across, click save state, you just click it once, and then once you load back into the emulator, you'll see it's there. You can just go straight over to it, click load, and it loads it instantly. Ideal if there's not a save stage in the game and you need to nip out, or you've got a bit of an emergency or something, you can quickly press that and then come back to it whenever you want. So we'll have a quick look at the gameplay 6 times here, running fine, 60 frames per second. And the thing with the PSP, the natural screen was basically like a widescreen 16:9 format. So whereas on the other emulators you have to put the widescreen hacks on to make them look well, even though it was such a small screen on the PSP, upscaled and full 16:9 ratio, I think the games look really well on it. I've not really noticed them stretched. Saying that, I am as old as shit, but they look fine to me and they play really well. Some really good games on the PSP. And one other thing I'm going to say before I carry on is, when I'm playing these games, it's basically going into a USB video capture card, and I was playing them on my telly. So when I play the racing games and I'm crashing into every wall, you know why. I literally press left and it doesn't do it till about a second after I pressed it. So that's my excuse anyway. I'm sticking to that one. So yeah, that's running fine anyway now. We'll take a look at scraping the system. So while we're inside the PPSSPP wheel, we're going to press back to bring up the main menu. We're going to go down to Scraper, scrape from Screen Scraper, Scraper settings. Now you can choose whatever you want to download here. If you want the title screenshot, these are what I prefer. I prefer to have the screenshot on. I prefer to have a 3D box. I prefer the logo to be the wheel, not the marquee, because the marquee's got a box around it, and I think the wheel is a better looking logo basically. And then also you can put all this other stuff on. You can download manuals, you can download fan art, you can do whatever you want, download the pad to key settings. I just keep it as it is here. I never look at the manuals. That again is personal preference. Also in the settings here, you can go into games missing any media or games missing all media. So basically, if you've got something that's half scraped, you can choose to go onto games missing all media, and it will only download artwork for the games that have no media whatsoever. And also, if you go into the ignore recently scraped games. So basically, if you've scraped something recently, if you want to re-scrape it and put, say, 2D boxes on, or you want to scrape it some differently, you can go in and choose what you want to download, and then you choose no here. And then it would basically just ignore whatever you've scraped over the last week or whatever, and it'll just go and download everything. And also on the other hand, if you was halfway through scraping the PSP and you had to turn your computer off for some reason, you can come back in, leave that and ignore recently scraped games over the last day or week or 15 days, and it's just going to download the artwork for what you need. Systems included, obviously we're only going to be scraping the PlayStation Portable. So before we do, I'm going to show you, if we go to the internet, Google, we type in Screen Scraper. Now Screen Scraper is the top site here, which is French. Basically, if you sign up to Screen Scraper, you can scrape a whole system. So it's going to be able to scrape multiple files at once. If you haven't got a Screen Scraper account, it's only going to let you scrape one game at a time. The other scraper providers, you don't have to do this. You don't have to have an account, but also they're not as good as Screen Scraper. Some systems they find a lot more than Screen Scraper, but as a rule, Screen Scraper's by far the best one. So as we load it up, you'll see might as well translate it to English. You can just translate it to English as you go. This is being updated all the time, so there's people adding new pictures for all the different systems, all the different arcades all the time. So basically, if you're already registered, you can log in or you can click register here. It doesn't cost you anything. If you don't want it to, you can give them a donation, which I tend to do with most of these because I think they do a brilliant job and it really helps out. But as you can see here, all the newer systems, they're adding to it all the time. So constantly updating the system. So as you can see here, you can tip them basically. If you want to give them a little bit of a tip, you can see here you can go as low as €1. You don't have to do this, it's just a way of saying thank you because they do a really good job and it really helps with you building your system. So anyway, we'll get this scraped. Down to scrape from the main menu, go down to scrape now and press the turbo boost button. So basically while this is scraping, this took about an hour to scrape for me. Now I've got full fibre internet, so it's pretty quick, my internet. I get like 900 meg per second download speed. But obviously this is only going to download as fast as they upload, so it took about an hour to download 620 games, which is fine, because it obviously found pretty much every game, and that's including the videos, the boxes, and the screenshot. So once this is scraped, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to show you me doing it, but I'm going to go down, I'm going to remove a load of games, I'm going to take a load of puzzle games out, I'm going to remove all the PSP mini games. A lot of them are really playable, but at the same time, I don't want them in the master build. I'll leave quite a lot of puzzle games on because there's a lot of them that's really good and really playable. So once I've done all that, I'll come back and I will show you a little bit of configuring and then obviously some gameplay at the end. So now they've finished scraping. If we go to game settings, update games list, and then it's going to load all the artwork that we just found. And there we go, we're looking all pretty. We'll have a look at the two different cores now. Basically, this is the standalone core, full screen. As you can see, it looks really well, to be fair. It's still on 6x resolution, plays really well and looks good. Everything's set up. You don't have to mess about with the controllers, it's automatically set up. I've got two versions of this here, so I'm going to delete one of them. Now basically we'll flick it onto the Liberto core. Now if you come down to the default unglazed and the decorations, that's going to put the PSP border on. So basically it's going to shrink the screen and make it look like a PSP on your screen. If you go into the user interface, this is where you can put your frames per second counter on. So that's how it looks with the bezel. A lot of people prefer that. It shrinks the screen down a bit. I think these look really well full screen, so I don't believe you need the bezel on it at all. Now, if you come into your Retroarch menu, depending on how you've got your hotkey set up, mine is my Xbox button and the red button on the Xbox controller. First thing to do is, on the PPSSPP core, the circle and the cross buttons are mixed up. It might be something to do with the Japanese version, I'm not 100% certain. But basically, the circle button is the cross button is the circle, so we're going to change them around in here. You just come down to it, whichever one you want changing. Click it. Obviously cross, I'm going to change that to circle, and then I'm going to change circle to cross. Press B button to go back, go to manage remap files. So obviously in here, if you just wanted it to change it for one game, you could click on the save game remap file, then it's only going to alter the settings for this one game. Also, you can come down to save core remap file, which is basically going to change for the old PSP, which is obviously what we want here, because I want the cross and the circle button to be switched on every single game, obviously. And now, as you can see up the top, it's changed to the PPSSPP remap file, where it says active remap file. And that's because we've saved it as the core. Have a quick look in here as well at the options. Obviously, you can change the resolution in here. You can do a lot of the stuff that you can do in the main menu. So basically, if I wanted to play this game and I wanted to set the resolution a little higher just for this one game, I could come in, say we'll put it on this 3840 by 2176. Come back to manage core options. It says Retroarch core options at the top. Now if I click save game options, you'll see that that's changed now to Hot Shots Tennis Get a Grip. Basically any options that you change in there, if you save it for the game file, it will only change it for that one game. So if we delete that file, you can see it's gone back to the Retroarch core options config. Same again now with the options. If I want to save it for every single PSP game, I would click Save Content Directory Options. And as you can see, that's now changed it to PSP options. So it's not just for the one game. That's going to alter anything that I've done and apply it to every single game. So when I go to load the game back up, I've noticed my frames per second counter isn't showing. And that's obviously because we've got the bezel, we've got the PlayStation Portable bezel on. Once I go into the Retroarch menu, you can see it in the top right hand corner, but the actual bezel's hiding it. So I'm going to turn the bezel off while I'm doing the testing. So again, press back, we'll go down to the decorations. I'm going to set it onto none. And as you can see now, we'll load the game up and the frames per second counts in the top right hand corner. Also, another thing I forgot to say, if you're using the bezel, the border, you need to set the ratio onto auto so it shrinks the screen according to the bezel. Otherwise it will be stretched and you'll be missing half your screen. Well, as I get down to the Lego games, obviously with this system, I didn't want any repeat games. Now the Lego games are on the PlayStation 2 and the PSP. There was also on the GameCube as well. So I wanted to have a quick look to compare the two. I wanted to have a quick look to see if I wanted to leave them on the PSP or the PlayStation 2 basically. So what I do, I come back out of the PSP collection. I go down to all games. jump to the letter beginning with L, so I'm going to go straight down to the Lego games, and it's going to put the PlayStation 2 and the PSP games in there. As you can see, there's a few duplicate games like the Batman game, Indiana Jones, also Star Wars. As you can see here, Star Wars 2, I've got it on both PlayStation 2 and PSP, so I'm going to load up the PlayStation 2 version first. And with this one, there's graphic issues when it loads up, because it's all squarey and blocky. I've seen it before, I can't remember if I fixed it last time I ran into it. I do so much I forget, but it could probably be fixed with just something in the menu. It's probably just a quick setting that'll sort it out. So then I'll load the PSP version up, and as you can see, it's running perfect. It looks really well. Same with Indiana Jones, PlayStation 2 version first. This one's got no issues, runs really well. Now I'll load the PSP version up. To be fair, I can barely tell any difference. So although I didn't want any repeat games, at the minute for now, I'm going to leave both collections on, as I don't know which one to delete, to be fair. So we'll have a quick look at Army of 2, and this is the 5x setting. You see top right hand corner, it's running full speed. Now when I load the save state up on Army of 2, you'll notice at the start it drops frames. At the start I thought it was slowing down, but it's not. It's actually just something when it first loads up from the save state. So we'll try it on 7x now. This is on the PPSSPP core, basically. Again, as you can see, top right corner, it's on 48 frames per second. And then it shoots up to 60 frames per second and it stops there, so it runs totally fine at that. So again, we'll come back out. I'm going to go down to the resolution. And as it's running well on 7x, I'm going to put it on 10x. Again, load up the same thing here. It's like running 50 frames per second. But I sort of kind of noticed it wasn't changing how it looked whatsoever. Same again, we're back up to 60 frames per second here, but the graphics didn't seem to change whatsoever, and it was just really weird. So I'm going to come into the Retroarch menu, go down to options, and as you can see here, it's not actually changing the resolution. It's still on 1920 with 1088. So changing that setting in that menu for the PPSSPP core wasn't actually changing the resolution. So I'm going to try it on 3840 by 2176 from inside here. Now we have to reload the emulator up for it to take effect. And again, that's running fine. Come down to options, and I'm going to knock it straight up to the highest resolution. Come back out, reload it, and as you can see, that's totally unplayable now. Really bad audio stutter, and it's shocking basically. So I'll come back in, knock it down, and I'll try it out the second one down. And again, we're only getting 20 odd frames per second, really bad audio stutter, totally unplayable. So for this game, we're obviously seeing that the 3840 by 2176 resolution seemed to be running fine, but just for compatibility, I'm going to put it on the 2400 by 1360 setting, which is basically one up from 1920 by 1080. I believe the games look really well at this setting, and they all seem to run absolutely fine, so it's a sort of good common ground, basically. This is a great little game as well, this Army of 2. I really like this game, to be fair. So now we'll have a look at Call of Duty. As you can see, we're only hitting 45 frames per second. So I'm going to go in, down to options. I'm going to change it from 2400 by 1360 down to the 1920 by 1088. Restart it. Now again, the frames per second counter at the top was showing slow when it first loaded up, but the game was running fine. So one thing you notice now, games like this shooting game with Call of Duty and stuff like that, and Medal of Honor, basically because the PSP only had the D-pad and the one thumbstick and then the 4 buttons, obviously. Sometimes some of these games, if you had a PSP, you'd remember. Some of these games, they basically changed the 4 buttons, the triangle, the cross, the circle and the square, as your looking button. Which obviously on a normal controller would be a right thumbstick. But as it didn't have one, they had to use the buttons instead. So a way around doing it is if you come into the options, go down to controls, port 1 controls. Now basically what we're going to need to do is we're going to swap the 4 buttons, basically the triangle, square, circle and cross, to the right thumbstick. So basically when you push up on your right thumbstick, it's going to be the same as pressing the triangle button. Push right on the right thumbstick, it's going to be the same as pressing the circle button. Down on the right thumbstick will be the X button, left on the right thumbstick will be the square button. And also because they changed the controls, so basically the buttons was working like your right thumbstick normally would. All the button options, like for reloading, for crouching, for changing your weapon, was put to the D-pad. So we're also going to change the controls from the D-pad to the buttons. So to start off, we're going to go with the A button. We're going to change that to D-pad right. Then the B button is going to be D-pad down. The X button, D-pad up. The Y button, D-pad left. Then we're going to come down to the right thumbstick. We're going to change up on the right thumbstick to the triangle. Down on the right thumbstick to the cross. Left on the right thumbstick to the square. And right on the right thumbstick to the circle. So again, once you've finished calibrating it, if you press back, then go into Manage Remap Files, Save Game Remap File. We obviously don't want this to change for all the different games, which would be clicking the Save Content directory. So we're going to go into Save Game Remap File. And as you can see there, Call of Duty Roads to Victory Remap File is saved. Now, once that's saved once, every time you come in and change it, you can keep coming in and altering it, and it will automatically save it. You don't have to keep clicking Save once you've done it once. And now if we come back out, that's set up perfectly for me how I would play it. The right thumbstick's looking about, your left thumbstick's a move, forwards, backwards, left and right. Exactly how you'd want it set up on a first-person shooter, basically. So one other quick thing here with Medal of Honor Heroes 2. It's basically the same as Call of Duty where I showed you how to configure earlier on. So you'd come in and you can either set it up again how you want it, change all the buttons around, or if you come in here and click load game remap file, you can just click your Call of Duty remap, which will load the settings we made earlier on. Then you can save the game configuration file, so it will save it and also put you a Medal of Honor Heroes 2 remap file. So basically you don't have to go through and configure it all again. Also, there's a lot of other games, coded and stuff like that, that you'd use this same sort of system on, this same configuration. You can just do it for them all, basically.
To use overdive, Aya. You can jump into and take over someone else's body.
Keep transferring from vessel to maintain an advantage.
So that's another one out of the way, peeps. It's starting to look like a decent little system now, and the PSP is a great little addition to it. Like I said earlier, great little system the PSP was. Some really good playable games on it. They look really well upscaled and they run really good. The PPSSPP emulator is a really, really good compatible emulator. So I'm probably going to stick on handhelds with the next video. I'm going to stick a load of the older ones on one video because obviously they're not going to take much configuration. I'll probably do it over a couple of videos and then maybe do a DS and a 3DS video separately. But anyway, I'm not going to blabber on too much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, peeps.